Okay.
Welcome everyone. This is the GEW event with Rise Birth Center for GEW 2020. Global Entrepreneurship Week is a worldwide event that takes place every year where women and all entrepreneurs come together to show what innovations they are working on and what they're doing in their community. We're joined today with Yasmin Rose, who's going to lead the fireside discussion of women and females breaking barriers there in the UAE. We're joined with a number of people throughout the globe today. So if you'd like to say where you're from, you can just change your name on the participant list and record which country you're from. We're going to remain with our cameras off other than the speakers, and then everyone is welcome to turn the cameras on for Q&A. If you have any questions or technical support that you need, go ahead and ask that in the chat, and then I can read the questions for Q&A to Yasmin after. Thank you, ladies.
Great. Thanks, Karina. And thanks for joining us, everyone. I'll start with introductions. I'm Yasmin. I'm with Rise Birth Center, trying to open a birth center in the United Arab Emirates. I'm joined with Andrea, Maha, and Sophie, and I'll let Andrea introduce herself. She's with Out of the Blues, a group for postpartum depression and mental illness support, and she has Amazing Mom Sensory products as well. Andrea, do you want to tell us briefly about what you're up to? Oh, you're muted, sweetheart. Thank you.
So busy chatting to myself. I get the answers I want that way. I've been in Dubai for 12 years and I'm a mum of 2 children. Oscar is 13 with autism and Maisie is 11. And I delivered Maisie here. After having Maisie, I developed PTSD and PTSD due to birth trauma, also postpartum depression, which led me to set up Out of the Blues for those suffering from mental illness in the Middle East, because I discovered there wasn't really anything here existing at that time. And Oscar being autistic is what drove me to set up Amazing Mum Sensory Supplies to provide sensory and therapy items to families and centers at a reasonable price.
Lovely, thanks so much. And Sophie Smith is with Nabta Health, which is a women's hybrid health company and application to help put kind of more power into women's hands for getting their own knowledge and information about their own health. Sophie?
Thank you. So I'm the co-founder of Nabta Health. We empower women to manage their health with privacy, autonomy, and convenience using a new model of hybrid healthcare. What this means is that we put women at the center of their care, and we give them the ability to identify and manage underlying health conditions that may be preventing them from achieving their health goals. My background in terms of Nabta, well, I had actually had 4 companies in social impact before I founded Nabta. I set up a doctor finding appointment booking platform in Pakistan. I set up a plastic recycling company in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone's first waste management company, but none of the companies was really kind of the company for me. And then when I moved to the UAE, I went to speak at a conference on diabetes in Kuwait, and there got chatting to a guy, not about diabetes, but about the fact that I was pregnant. A month or so later, he sent me a bunch of statistics, what are signs that women were hesitant potentially to seek out treatment and advice as early as they should. 80% of breast cancer is diagnosed at stage 4, 40% of women not attending a single antenatal appointment. And a study that actually Yasmin and I did with the Ministry of Health in the UAE recently, we learned that postpartum depression rates are at 56%. The more I learned about it, the more I realized that a lot of this was to do with the fact that there was a culture of shame attached to many aspects of women's health. A lot of things, particularly fertility or kind of hereditary condition related, were seen as very taboo. A lot of stigma around mental health, as Andrea has mentioned. And so we decided to build a desk health in the region, one that would help address and confront different aspects of their health in a way that was truly linguistically appropriate, but also in a very productive and proactive way manage their health. So them in a personalized way to resources and tools relevant.
Great, very exciting for both of your companies. I think I will go ahead and start the questions, and when Maha comes in, we'll introduce her as well. Andrea, I'd like to start with you, if you don't mind, and understand what's been your biggest challenge for growing out of the blues, because it's been a topic that's not really accepted right off the bat when you start talking it, and what's been raising awareness for mental health? What's the biggest challenge for doing that for you?
Yeah, so like I say, when I first set up Out of the Blues, which was now over 10 years ago, there was nothing here in the way of conversation. There was no community support, there was no peer support, there was next to nothing really. You would go and see a doctor, they would give you a prescription and you'd be sent on your way. The prospect of talking therapy was, pretty much swept under the carpet, which made it massively challenging, because if you look at the statistics, peer support is one of the top 3 elements for a successful recovery. So it is something that is needed, not just medication, not just talking therapy with a professional. We need to be able to talk to other people that truly understand, because they've walked those shoes, they've been on that path. It makes a big difference. So for us, the biggest challenge has been the cultural stigma and the fact that mental illness is very, very taboo, as Sophie said. There are still in our group, we have a very multicultural group. We have people from the subcontinent, people from Europe, people from the Southern Hemisphere, local ladies, you name it, they're in the group, because mental health does not stigmatize. But society does. And that has been our biggest challenge in getting the word out and getting the support that people need.
So you're saying part of the support out of one of the top 3 is that people talking to other people, not necessarily a professional, about their issues.
Yeah, so other people that have been in the same situation.
Yep.
So, and I obviously have worked with an awful lot of healthcare professionals over the 10 years. And one of the things that I've talked to them about is medication. And I've asked each and every one of them if they've ever been on any form of antidepressant medication. Yeah. And 9 out of 10 will say no. At which point my question is, well, how do you know how it feels then? Right. How do you, and I'm not saying they should take it if they don't need it, but you can listen, and I truly respect medical professionals 100%. You can listen, you can support, but you don't truly understand. When I say to you, my day is like trying to climb Mount Everest in wellies or gumboots or whatever you want to call them. That's not necessarily something you could understand unless you've tried it, right?
Right.
And on a lot of days, people that have been in my situation, we expect women, for example, to get up in the morning and be elated because they have this new baby and it's the most amazing experience. Well, for some people, it's not. For some people, it's one of the worst, hardest, most challenging things that they've ever experienced in their lives. And then there's the guilt, because it's supposed to be amazing. Society expects you to be elated. They expect you to glow. You're supposed to be beautiful. Breastfeeding's meant to be easy. We put so many pressures on people, and we fail to realize that actually for everybody, that's not the reality. Sorry, not for everybody. For a lot of people, that's not the reality. That is not the truth.
Okay, thank you. Maha, I'll skip back to you. Maha is working on a few different projects. She does research for immunology diseases, and she is doing a lot of work for AIDS specifically, as well, and HIV positive people. Would you like to share more?
kind of what you're up to, Mother.
So we started a nonprofit organization to support women who are living with HIV. And we've started that because we saw the need. Of course, the country provides the best treatment, and the medications are free for anyone who is HIV positive. Yet, after the clinic, they don't have any like support groups to help them out, as Andrea mentioned. So we needed to establish the right environment for them that they can support each other, as well get the information in the right place instead of Google and just comments from other people. As Andrea mentioned, how would you know if you don't have the right information? So that's one thing. Yes.
Great, thanks. Okay, Sophie, why do you feel working with taboo topics is important?
I think working with taboo topics is important because these are the areas where women are most likely to experience unnecessary suffering, either because they don't have the tools, or they don't have the education, or they don't have the awareness, or they don't have the support to deal with issues that could potentially be life-threatening, or if not life-threatening, could have a detrimental impact on them and their wellness in the short and long term. So, for example, if you take the topic of fertility, we know that about 1 in 5 couples seeks fertility advice and treatment in the MENA region every year. The MENA region has the highest rates of infertility in the world, and this is largely due to the prevalence of non-communicable diseases like obesity, diabetes, and generally sort of poor lifestyle choices, the widespread prevalence of fast food, the generally lower nutritional content of food that's available on the market. And so the great unknown is how many couples, and if we assume that with many of the causes of infertility, such as polycystic ovary syndrome, there's up to a sort of 70% correlation with metabolic disorders like obesity, like insulin resistance, then that about a third of adults now in the GCC diabetic or pre-diabetic, and over half are overweight. So you can assume that the number of couples who actually conceive because of non-communicable diseases is much higher than the 1 in 5 advice and support. And again, this is a region that places a huge precedent on having a family. If you start a family for whatever reason, it's really dramatic, and I think causes couples a lot of suffering. And again, for women, while I guess male fertility is also prone to sort of oscillations, and the quality of sperm does deteriorate after a certain age, is more prone to DNA fragmentation. Women have a much stronger biological clock where, after the age of 35, 36, your ovarian reserves start to reach a point where they're quite diminished, and so your likelihood of conceiving is less. So, if you struggle in silence to conceive for 10, 12, 15 years, and we know many women who are in that situation, it's often it's a battle that women will struggle to win. By the time they get to a point where they're really in pain and see kind of a way out is through assisted reproductive technology such as IVF or IUI, the likelihood of conceiving even with those has dropped below 20%. The likelihood of conceiving with IVF over the age of 38 or at the age of 38 is about 21%, and it drops off. So dealing with things in a timely manner is very important, and as long as a topic is taboo, there's a much greater hesitancy to deal with it, and this real issue, and why making it possible for women to access information in a way that doesn't expose them, doesn't force them to be in a public forum where they can do a lot of the exploring, a lot of self-educating, potentially without telling anybody, not even their friends or their husbands or the people who are closest to them. Even doing a lot of the groundwork in terms of understanding how they might be deficient or how their hormonal imbalance would be is critical, because these discoveries, this education, this feeling of understanding your body empowers you. It gives you the courage to make difficult decisions, and that's important. So yeah, I think with Nabta we say that we care about the things that women care about, but really we care about things, so privacy, autonomy, convenience, on the assumption that it's difficult for women to think about initially, and so we have to take it gently, step by step.
Yeah, so it sounds like as well the education that you're providing and the education that women are getting are really helping to empower them to kind of get over this being a taboo topic. And if it's not so taboo, then maybe we would have more information just available readily.
Yeah, and gosh, there are so many topics that fall under this umbrella. Infertility is one. I mean, basically every person you have on the call deals with it. Highly true, but even things like menstrual cycles. What is a normal period? What is heavy? Like most women don't know that periods shouldn't be painful. Potentially endometriosis. Potentially you've got some structural abnormalities, cysts, fibroids, things like this. Don't understand what taking hormonal contraceptives might do in terms of masking symptoms of underlying health conditions. Don't understand that as women, you spend about 6.5 years of your life menstruating, and so 6.5 years of your life you're in contact with period products, and a lot of traditional period products are full of bleach and chemicals and a lot of other things that in ordinary circumstances, if you put them on your hands, you wash your hands quite thoroughly afterwards, but which women are very accepting of having in contact with very sensitive areas of their body for long periods of time. Even things like this aren't really talked about, and like little decisions that have big implications for women in the long term.
That's a bit scary, isn't it? Yeah, to not know what we don't know, frankly. Great, thank you.
Yes.
Maha, what growth have you seen since starting your journey, as far as like getting the word out for your taboo topic?
Yeah, so thank you for asking me that, because I was going to interrupt and discuss this topic as well. So there are two sensitive areas that we're targeting: is women in a very conservative region, and HIV, which is a taboo. So people consider HIV is a bad behavior, is linked and related to bad behavior. So if you've got HIV or the AIDS disease, you got the virus or the disease, that you have committed a sin, which is wrong. The majority of women that I have seen in the clinic and the hospitals are victims. So and we had to, it was a struggle to initiate it. We have the support from the government, we have the support from clinicians, ID consultants around us. They want to see this organization grow, but it was hard to start it, where to start it from. So it was not an easy road, I have to say. But at the end, it worked out. And at the end, people are listening. I mean, the generation, the Saudi population, if you see the census, the latest reports, 70% is 30 years and younger. And they are hungry for information. And I think they are more open to discuss these freely. So we started like small campaigns, and we started a national survey as well, and we have data that shows us that there is lack of awareness, and when you have lack of awareness, you'll have all the increase of number of new infected patients. And when we started our awareness program at a small level and small scale, I've noticed that people want to know. When you ask them these questions, like, do you know how the virus is transmitted? Do you know that you can get still pregnant if you're HIV positive? Do you know that you can still get you can get married? And people like get astonished from our questions. I didn't know, and they want to continue to ask questions. And so I think it's the timing is amazing right now to start a bigger awareness program. And I think people's perspective about the disease, about the virus, is changing. So I don't think it's going to be any more taboo. It was initially when the start, and it was difficult, but I think gradually it will disappear. Yes.
Oh, that's optimistic. Great. Great to hear.
Very optimistic. I mean, we have videotapes, and I'll share it with you. When we did the surveys, we've done it in malls, we've done it in schools, we've done it at clinics, waiting area, and we were doing hands-on because people were not responding to WhatsApp or messages or text, and nobody's going to do their 45 questions, online. But we had to force it. Students of mine went on, all these places, and then when we asked them the question, they asked us to explain. So they are hungry to learn, hungry for this program. I think it was an amazing experience, and I've seen it with different age category, female and males, and I think we can make a great impact if we make this awareness program at a bigger scale. Yeah.
Great, amazing. Okay, so Andrea, what do you believe would be a helpful step from the government to address some mental health issues? What do you suggest?
So one of the biggest challenges for us prior to COVID, but even heightened since COVID started, is the affordable accessibility to mental health provision and medication, as well as support groups. So for a group like mine, it's very difficult to get the licenses and to get the support that we need. But then add to that, we have an awful lot of members who are on pay cuts, who are financially marginalized, who were financially marginalized prior to COVID. There is very little accessible mental health provision in the UAE as a whole. But one of the biggest challenges I feel we face is there is no mother and baby unit in the GCC. So, for example, we've had mums who have suffered from postpartum psychosis who need hospitalization and they need intensive care and support. In the GCC, mother and baby would be separated because a baby couldn't be in that psychiatric unit. Yeah. However, that is proven to be actually hugely detrimental to the mother's well-being.
Well, sure, you're taking the baby away.
Right. Yeah. The point is she needs to be with the baby. She needs to build the relationship, have the support that she needs, be safe. The baby needs to be safe, but we're not providing that. We're separating them. Mum goes into a generalized psychiatric unit with other people with other challenges. And it just isn't a nurturing, supportive environment. So actually we need an overhaul of the mental health provision here. And we need to be looking at the broader spectrum as opposed to generalizing all mental health.
Yeah, fair enough. And to really look at postpartum separate, or do you think all sorts of different issues should be looked at separately as well?
I actually think we need to be looking at different issues separately. We only recently did they change the laws to say that suicide would no longer be an arrestable offense.
Yeah.
Right. That's only just come in. I've been fighting for this for 10 years, we have people in our group who genuinely are hanging on by their fingernails, but they cannot get the help and support they need. One, because it's not necessarily financially accessible, but two, because the facilities just aren't there. And it isn't okay to have a mum and a baby in a generalized unit, but it's also not ideal to have someone with self-harming in a generalized psychiatric unit or substance misuse in a generalized psychiatric unit. We need to start realizing that this is a far broader spectrum and treating each individual disorder, disease, illness for what it is, as opposed to just generalizing and sweeping it under the carpet.
Yeah. And is there...
Andrea, you raised it. Sorry, Yasmin. I was just going to say you raise a really interesting point around just around postpartum care in general. I think if you are looking at kind of gaps in the ecosystem in the GCC, maybe not so much in Saudi, but definitely in the UAE, postpartum care is a big one. And again, particularly for women who suffer pregnancy or infant loss. And this extends, in fact, to the wider MENA region. We have had several women who have firstly had their concerns around preeclampsia and other kind of high-risk pregnancy complications go ignored, who've then ended up delivering dead babies around 35, 36 weeks. Babies immediately taken away. The mothers haven't even seen them, and then the mothers have been admitted straight to delivery wards, where they've been in wards with mothers who have given birth to live babies. And the one woman, you know, even had a lactation consultant come round and teach her how to breastfeed. She said, "My baby is dead." And there was just no comprehension of how to deal with women who had lost their babies, or so I think the care pathways are definitely, I mean, from my perspective, it's exciting because it's an opportunity, and it's the opportunity to build things better than they exist in other places. But there's definitely a lot of work to do in the postpartum space.
Right, and the scary thing, Sophie, is that that's my experience from 10 years ago. I delivered my daughter, who went straight into intensive care. No one told me for 2 hours whether or not she was even alive, let alone whether or not I had a boy or a girl. And then they wanted to put me into a maternity ward. And I said, I'm not going somewhere where other mums have their babies and my daughter's critically ill. That, can you not see how damaging that might be? You know, and that was 11 years ago. So why are we still seeing that today? Why are we not learning from that when there are so many of us having these conversations? You know, so there is so much still to learn, Yasmin, not just here, across the world. You know, we certainly can't say this region is on its own in that, but I think we're very lucky that there are women like the four of us that are standing there and saying, this is where we need to go, this is the direction, and these are the things that we need to look at changing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing, of course. And it's really enlightening to hear the stories. You know, the first time I talked to you a few months ago about it, I was just kind of outraged, actually. You know, because you don't, if you're not in it yourself personally, you don't know. We're not having that broader conversation to understand, like, this is why it needs to change. This is what's happening. We don't even necessarily know. Sophie, do you want to elaborate on what other opportunities you see for the region as well?
Well, I think in general, there have been several webinars, and I think some of them have been conducted as part of GW this week, on how Saudi has the potential to be the health tech hub globally, because they have got a huge amount of capital. Firstly, I know Maha, Maha's like, yes. They've done it, I think, in a very diligent way. They've assessed the kind of healthcare ecosystems around the world, and particularly in the GCC, seen what works, what doesn't, investing heavily into now tech, doing a lot to support local startups as local companies in the local ecosystem, which is still something that is fairly unique actually in the region. Within the meaning, there is obviously some support within certain sectors for local companies, mostly in e-commerce and marketplaces. But for things that are more deep tech or have a deeply clinical scientific base, the tendency still is to bring companies from outside and try and get them to set up presences here, whereas Saudi Arabia is now investing a lot of money into growing its companies and its research expertise from the ground up. If you personally, I think the region has the opportunity, because of its appetite, its geography, its youth, and also just the speed at which it's developing, not only to be a hub for health tech, but also to be a hub for impact innovation. You know, the next billion people are coming out of Africa, and even within the MENA region, there's a huge disparity in terms of access, education, and wealth. And you know, the GCC has the opportunity to really define what the future from a technical and healthcare standpoint looks like in the surrounding areas, so in the Middle East and Africa and South Asia. And once it does that and establish itself as a center of excellence and also a trusted center, then it has the potential, I think, to realize what is the UAE's immediate vision to become a kind of a hub from a medical tourism perspective. So many opportunities. I think it's going to be an interesting decade for the GCC.
I just learned recently another like perk to Saudi that they had the health plans and what they're doing, their 2030 goals. And part of that is adding birth centers like extensively throughout their region, and kind of for each hub and each area that they have plans to do that. And it's like, how did you get permission? How did it get accepted? But they are very forward thinking, and they're seeing what works. And yeah, it will pay off for them for sure.
Yeah, probably the best person to comment on this is Maha.
I was just gonna switch over to her.
So yes, I mean, you can see it with COVID situation. I'm proud that my country was able to contain the spread in the pandemic of COVID. The strategies of treatment was implemented at early stage since February actually, and even the category of the disease. I don't know if I'm supposed to share this, but usually the WHO recommended the category of the disease severity is into 3, asymptomatic versus mild, and A, B, and C is the severity. What we categorize is 4. So to be that specific, between mild and moderate, we have like an intermediate phase of different symptoms, and that would help in patient care. They are investing in pharmaceutical industry. We want to be independent within our R&Ds, research and development. Since our youth, as I said, we have like 70% of our population are young, highly motivated, and you can see all this news upcoming with lots of projects coming from young innovators, either in engineering or in medicine. Yes, they're doing amazing, and I'm so proud to take a very small, tiny part of it. Thank you. That's it. Yeah.
Maha, do you also want to expand on what you need to implement your plans? Because you have a target of having 90% of the population screened for HIV and 90% of those people on treatment, and then 90% responding to the treatment. So what would help you to implement that?
So you know that the World Health Organization's goal, the UN AIDS program, their target is that at each country they have to reach 90, 90, 93 90s in a row for HIV. So 90%, the first 90 represent that your the first 90 represent that you have to have your entire population to be screened. Okay, and that is because you can't stop the spread of the virus. And the second 90 is that all those 90% who are positive are 90% at least on treatment. And then the other third 90 is they have the effective outcome. So a few countries reached this goal. I think it was only the Netherlands who reached so far the 90-90. We only achieved as the country, Saudi, reached only the middle 90, which is that every single HIV patient is provided treatment. Yet, what we want from our NGO is to screen more. So when that is, you cannot just go and screen people, you have to make them aware of the disease first, and the consequences of the transmission, and then give them the opportunity that if you get diagnosed early, you have a better prognostic and better care and better management of the disease. So yes, that's one of the challenges, and our target for the next 2 years is just to increase and make our awareness program hit hard and go big, hopefully. And I think yes, we're going to do something with you with the screening, right?
You're doing something with Sophie for the screening? Sorry, what did you say?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So we are one of the things that Nabta will be launching hopefully soon, definitely within the next 6 months, is home testing using small volumes of capillary blood at a large number of with this. But then again, you know, this is another way for women to, in a very discreet way, and potentially with anybody else knowing, because you get a test kit, but it's pretty much in a plain box. You can take the sample yourself. Either women will be given a lancet, or they'll be given a little
I think the
self-sampling device that
connections
painlessly
with
takes the blood for them.
yes.
Go on,
Go
Maha.
ahead, Maha. All right, I'll just carry on then. Andrea, have you found the journey to have
I
conversations?
don't know. Is it from my side or your side, the connection? Yes. I
We
don't know
hear
if
you
the
now.
okay, great. The connection was lost from my side then. Oh, okay. So sorry, what was the question?
Sophie was just expanding on how they're going to be doing home
I was
testing.
just explaining, yeah,
Yes.
how the
Okay.
blood test will work.
So can I add something on that? So you cannot provide home testing for such sensitive topic for example, HIV, to everyone without giving them the knowledge and education about the virus and the disease first. So we do have the self-testing here, but we haven't yet provided it yet. So before we start the awareness program, I don't think it's a good idea, because once we want the person or the individual, once he or she gets tested, they, and their expectations, where to go if they're positive, what to do if they're tested positive. That's very important. Is the next step, not just to get tested.
Oh, I agree,
Can I
Maha.
ask?
We have the same conversations around genetic testing. So, you know, testing is another one of these things where what you're giving people is the statistical likelihood of a certain condition. And you need to provide them with a lot of context up front. And then ideally, you need to give them genetic counseling in a very proactive way and in a very personalized way once they get the results. Otherwise, you open a can of worms and people don't know what to do with the material that you've given them. So it is definitely, awareness is absolutely key.
Yes, absolutely.
Andrea, were you going to add something as well?
Yeah, Maha, can I just ask, outside of your organization, what is there in the way of counseling for those that test positive? Support, education?
So all I can say is, from my knowledge, and which is restricted to an institute, they do provide counseling within the institutes. So within the healthcare system, within the hospital premises. But I've seen the challenges is outside the hospital. Where shall they go? That's the challenge for patients. And you know that our treatment and our healthcare is free for everyone. So we get swamped with patients on a daily basis. So to serve everyone is not going to be realistic. I mean, it doesn't mean that they don't do all these social support to the patient at the clinic, per visit, per appointment. But what we need is support system outside that. And this, you know what I mean? So it's like, this is the challenge, is that there isn't, to be honest, as much as far as I know, there isn't, and this is why we started this NGO. We are targeting women. We're specializing in women because it's a very conservative country. We're a bit segregated, and leave out the cultural issue. Women tend to have their own needs. I think they need to be supported among each other, and this is why we decided to have it more designated for women. Yes. So to answer your question, not yet. We don't have anything that is outside the hospital time. Yes.
Wonderful, you started it then.
Yes.
Andrea, do you want to share more on how your journey has been about sharing conversation or having these conversations about postpartum depression, and even like, you know, your sensory company and autism and things? Has it been harder or easier than you expected?
Way harder. I think certainly from the mental health perspective with regards to depression, obviously we've touched on it, all of us. There are cultural challenges, you know, and it's not about, as Maha said, it's not just about the resident culture. It's about the fact that we have so many people from across the globe, and only now in the last 10 years has the Western world been open to talking about mental health, you know, let alone the rest of the world, right? So any kind of mental health issues are very much taboo, very hidden away, kept swept under the carpet. So that has definitely been difficult. However, you may have picked up on the fact that I'm very open, very honest. I have always approached every discussion, both with mental health and also with my child's hidden disability, openly and honestly. And I think that that's really important. I do believe that the most important part of education is honesty. And I've done interviews that I've gone back and read the next day and gone, oh, God, did I really say that? Like, that's brutally honest. And now the whole world knows how batshit crazy I am. Sorry. Probably shouldn't have said that. You know, but exactly my point. That's kind of who I am. So I've done the interviews about me. I've done the interviews about Oscar, you know, running through City Hospital. If you can imagine a busy hospital at Christmas with this, I'd say about 20-foot Christmas tree. And my 9-year-old with autism decides that the best thing in the world right now is to get to the star on the top of this tree because he wants to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm literally standing there going, no, as he tries to navigate past this pregnant lady and her husband to get around them to scale the tree to get the star. And I'm just thinking, this thing's going to crash to the floor in the middle of a hospital. And then I'm going to have to explain this, right? Because no one knows he's disabled because you can't see it, because Oscar doesn't look disabled. He has autism. There's no physical disability for you to see, right? So those things make it so difficult. If I had a broken leg, people would open the door, they'd offer to carry my shopping, they'd be really supportive. But as soon as you have something that is not visible, not so easy to see, and I'm sure Maha's experienced this, and I'm sure Sophie has too, you know, as soon as it's a hidden thing, something that they can't see, they can't necessarily openly relate to, they'd rather just pretend it's not there. You know, and in the UAE, certainly in Dubai, we've recently rebranded disabilities as people of determination. And in all fairness, it makes me laugh every time I see it, because if I take Oscar to the mall and I park in a people of determination space, it's not him that's determined, it's me, because I'm determined we're going to survive. So actually, I'm convinced those spaces are more for the parents than for the child with autism. But, you know, it is what it is.
Do you have suggestions then for how to kind of make this rebranding more impactful?
I think one of the biggest things about disabilities is we need to stop using a wheelchair symbol to show a broad spectrum of disability. You know, Sophie has mentioned diabetes, which is classified as a disability at stages, and that isn't represented by a person sitting in a wheelchair. My child's autism isn't represented by a person sitting in a wheelchair. We need to stop thinking about disability as a physical impairment and start thinking about individual people that don't fit in a bulk standard box. And as society, we need to open our minds and be more accepting. It's that simple.
That was very eloquently put. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Sophie, I'll switch over to you. How do you think COVID-19 has changed the landscape for companies who are focused on social impact?
So there's companies that are focused on social impact, and there are companies that are focused on health. I think globally the world has woken up to two things. Firstly, population health and population security are really important. And a huge part of that is what the kind of baseline level of health of your population is. So again, going back to non-communicable diseases like diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, in the US, 94% of deaths and 78% of ICU admissions for COVID-19 occurred in people who had non-communicable diseases, had underlying health conditions. And the same has been the story the world over. I think the world has woken up to the fact that whatever we're doing to ensure that people stop becoming accidentally unwell isn't really working, and we need to do more around population health to make our populations healthier. And so there's been a huge increase in the amount of interest in health tech investments. So in the first half of 2020, $9.1 billion was invested into health tech, which is up 19% versus the same time last year, I think when $7.7 billion was invested. If you look at the UAE, for the first time, and it's mostly government backed at the moment, you see proper R&D taking place. The Mohammed bin Research Institute for non-communicable or for communicable diseases, was recently opened and announced. I think a lot of countries that didn't have any interest in R&D, again, with the race to create vaccine, etc., there then becomes the who's going to get vaccinated first. And if the R&D and if the vaccines are not being created in your country, then unless you've got a huge amount of purchasing power, which countries in the GCC do have, but many countries don't, but even then, you're going to be further down the list with that vaccine. So, every country is suddenly thinking, oh, we should have the personal protective equipment, we have the means within our own country to be coming up with these drugs and these discoveries to support our population. What is our population going to think if people around the world are being vaccinated and they're still being kept in lockdown or at risk because we don't have access to that vaccination? So the interest in R&D, interest in care has spiraled positively upwards. Yeah. In terms of social impact, again, I think there's been a really interesting evolution in working for 9 months. Now increasingly people are working from home, and companies saying that people will be working from home in the long term, which is having a detrimental impact on distribution of work from a gender perspective, on people. It is also doing is it is making people who work for organizations that don't have a mission or a vision that is bigger than themselves, who don't have some kind of impact associated with them, very demotivated. If you're sat at home and the walk around the block, or your children, or the dog, or your books, or anything is a hand reach away, and you're sitting working for a company where you don't feel a personal connection, you don't feel in alignment to the core values, you don't believe in what the company is doing, yes, maybe you work and you keep working for them, your mental health suffers quite seriously as a result. So I think there's going to be a grassroots demand for companies that have an impact, companies with sustainability mandate, companies that are acting in the interest of people and planet as well as profit.
That's interesting. That's an interesting concept. Sorry.
In terms of investments, $1 trillion has been committed across I was just going to say that $1 trillion has been committed around the world for investment into social impact. It's yet to actually be invested, but the appetite to invest in social impact now is definitely there.
I find it, so do you believe that people who are working from home now are noticing that they want to be working for more social impact or more like something that hits with their values more than before than when they were in an office?
Yes, because if you're in an office, most humans are, I mean, to greater or lesser degrees, naturally sociable beings. And so if you're in an office environment and you can have funny conversations with people over lunch, and you can meet people with coffee, and you can go and sit in someone's office and gripe, and you've got lots of opportunities for human interactions on a daily basis, then even if you absolutely hate the job that you do, it matters a little bit less. And a lot of people who work in jobs that they don't like say it's the people that keep them there and make the job. But if you're not with those people, if you're not with them, if you're not having those social interactions, what you're left with is your job. And again, when you're working from home, a lot of people have said that the line, the very distinct line between personal and professional lives has disappeared. And now, particularly if you work in multiple people in multiple time zones, people think they can contact you at any time of the day. You could start at 7, you could start at 11, you could finish at 7, you could finish at midnight. And so, yeah, I think people can tolerate it and do it up to a point. If this becomes a long-term working passion, I think you're going to start to see a fairly substantial transition away from businesses that don't have clear defined core values to businesses that do.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just hadn't really thought about it before. But yeah, it has been a period of more self-reflection, I think, as well. Definitely, especially with like lockdowns. Go ahead, Maha.
Andrea, I think there was a report that was published by the Saudi government. They have done a large study about the mental health of all the Saudi nationalities, and they wrote a very nice report for the 2030 vision. It's a national initiative, and they stratified all the high risk groups versus what are the factors, and that they implemented it to different ministries so that the Saudi population would have a better and healthier life outcome. I can share with you that full report. It was really amazing.
Yeah, I'd love to read that. And it's interesting, touching on what Sophie was saying. We've seen since February, when COVID obviously started to have an impact in the region, we've seen a huge influx of new members looking for support. We've seen a massive impact, not just from the financial elements of COVID, but from the family dynamics, being forced to homeschool children, having salary cuts, having to work from home, all of a sudden having to be with your husband 24 hours a day, or your wife 24 hours a day, and your kids 24 hours a day, not being able to just go for a walk, not being able to do the things that we did before, and it's, as Sophie says, having a job, your husband getting up in the morning and going out to work, even if he hated his job and he came home and he moaned about it for the next 2 hours, at least you had some respite, as opposed to him sitting at the other end of the dining table to where you're trying to homeschool your kids, and him being miserable doing his job there, or her being miserable, let's be fair, doing their jobs while you're trying to do your job as well. It's having a massive, massive impact. And we have seen so many members coming forward saying that they genuinely are not coping in their family dynamic as a result of this new normal, and having partners, loved ones forced to work from home. It's having a huge impact, and on their own mental health as well, having to work from home themselves and being isolated for those that don't have families. The amount of people that are working from home that are by themselves and totally alone, it's having a huge impact as well.
And not only that, even healthcare workers, they have suffered a lot of depression. We have seen lots of cases. So they were the frontliners and they were away from their families. It was a bad time. It was a really horrible time. Yeah.
There seems to be more anxiety too, at least from the ones that I know who are working in healthcare, because they don't know. They just feel like they're waiting to get it, and then they're out, and then they're putting more stress on their teams, and then they're short-staffed, and it's just kind of the cycle. And they feel bad saying no to shifts because they know they're short staffed, and then it's hard on their coworker. Yeah, it's a poor cycle at the moment, definitely. It's too bad it comes through and impacts all this mental health. Maha, I wanted to ask you, what is it like for an HIV patient in the GCC? What's kind of their experience, so we have more understanding of what they might be going through?
Honestly, and this is not just in Saudi Arabia, it's in the whole Arab country. It might be more focused in GCC, but this is normal in all the Arab country. It's very hard. So if you have HIV and you're tested HIV, you're doomed. You can't get married if you're single. You can't get a job. Yes, and the burden on a woman is even worse. And this is one of our objective with this organization, is to try to change the laws. Again, before we try to help change the laws, actually there is no law in our labor law. There is nothing that states that you cannot hire an HIV. It's the culture, it's people. So we have to change it. To be honest, it's I always look at HIV. It's like the late 80s in Europe and US, when they discovered HIV and AIDS. This is where we are right now in the Arab countries. Nobody wants to talk about it. That is before, but I'm telling you, the past 2 years, people are changing. The whole country is changing, even with these topics. So I'm optimistic that it will change.
There was something,
but it's hard.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
You had mentioned before that there's now more graduates who are researching this topic as well, and can you share about that a little bit?
When I came back from the US, I've noticed, like, okay, so we have the best research institutes in the Middle East. We're ranked #1 in the Middle East, and we're also recognized internationally. We do lots of genetics and cancer, cardio, transplant research, but nothing on HIV. So as an infectious disease, when I came back and I was starting to establish the immunocompromised host research program, and that is studying populations where their immune system is suppressed, whatever the reason is. Is it genetics, or is it cancer, or is it virus or drug induced? So we've started the first time the HIV/AIDS research effort. So we do have clinics, the best clinics. We have the best clinicians. Treatment are available. I remember when I wrote the first article, the first treatment was available once the FDA approved it in '96. So it was in '96, yeah, before the US got it. So they provide the treatment, but we don't have the research. So how are we going to cope with vaccine development if we don't even know the strain and type of the circulating virus that we have? And this is where what we have done. And the other thing is, because there is lack of awareness, patients here tend to take these antiviral drugs, right? And then for a couple of weeks, and then when they start to feel that they're getting better, they stop these antiviral drugs. And then what do? What happens is the virus mutates and it becomes stronger, just like superbugs if you misuse the antibacterial. So again, this is because lack of knowledge. But the research effort that the team did in my lab is they mapped all these mutations. So right now we can identify these mutations, and that helps physicians to better plan their antiviral regimen. So it started small, and I'm happy to say it started small, and everybody, I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, people are like, why are you working with HIV? There's only HIV. You can work with other viruses. Like, why HIV? Move on. And people were afraid to even enter my lab, that small lab, because they thought they would get HIV. So I had to put posters in the corridors just to show how the HIV virus is transmitted. I had to give workshops, and this is like you're talking about educating people. They should be aware. And then now I have to like people have to wait in line to get a chance to work in the HIV research. So this is where we are right now. Yes.
Great.
And
It's great
I'm
that
happy.
you've had so much growth.
Yes, absolutely. And they're a wonderful team, and they are working with HIV research, and we're happy. Yes.
Amazing. Great. I'm going to open it up to questions from anybody in the audience. Is there something? Yeah, Andrea is saying the key message from all of us has been that there needs to be more education.
Yes.
Definitely. For birth as well. I could go on and on. The more women know, the more they're empowered to make their own decisions and to be informed about those decisions and have then, as a byproduct, then a more satisfying experience, of course.
Yes, if anyone has a question, just put that in the chat. This has been incredible. Every one of you, thank you so much for what you're doing for the future and for everyone right now. This is so moving and inspiring to hear every one of your stories.
Thanks,
I'm gonna see
Karina.
if there's-
Thanks for helping us host here.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. See if there's any in the chat, and then I have a couple of questions.
I do as well. I've got a long list. So while we're waiting, I did want to know, what do you all find to be a most effective approach to make the topic more comfortable? You know, because for me, for birth, it's sometimes when you're talking to a man, they're just like, oh, that's a woman's thing, or like, oh, it's not safe. You know, how do you make it more comfortable for people to have those conversations? What are your tips and tricks?
Can I go first?
Yeah.
So actually, I often draw a parallel to when we get on a plane and they do the safety chat, you know, the doors, the lights, all this stuff. I often draw a parallel to the oxygen mask announcement. So when the oxygen mask comes down, you put yours on first, and then you see to other people. If I am not mentally well, how do I look after my kids?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a really important message that the whole world needs to understand, that mental health issues impact everybody. We all have bad days. We all have highs and lows. We have them in varying degrees, but we all have them. And the reason we all have them is for exactly the same reason we all stub our toes, we all get headaches, because ultimately we're not machines and our bodies are not infallible. And we need to start normalizing these things and appreciating the fact that having, I don't know, having postnatal depression, having substance misuse challenges, it's something that we have to own, and we have to be willing, you know, if I tell you I've had PTSD, it's because I'm prepared to own up and say that. And I can say that because I've been willing to move forward and work on that. And in all honesty though, Yasmin, I don't care if that makes you feel bad. I actually don't care if you feel embarrassed or you feel awkward about it, because hopefully by the time you finish talking about it, you'll have a better understanding, and you'll feel more, you'll see that actually I'm just a person that went through a difficult time, and the end result was PTSD, as opposed to my falling down the stairs and breaking my leg.
Well, that's just it, isn't it? Like, the more people talk about their own experiences, the more it kind of normalizes as well. Lots of people have mental health issues, you know, and I found myself when for example, had lucky enough to have somebody share their like alcoholism journey with me. And just knowing that, not that I needed it for myself, but knowing that really helped me be more empathetic to others and like have more things to say that are helpful for other people in that situation. So like the more the community is kind of aware of how to support each other, that's coming from people like you who are willing to speak out about it.
Right. And that's, you know, and that will be the same for Sophie and Maha as well. You know, not one of us has put ourselves in a position where we've deliberately harmed ourselves or gone out of our way to get an illness or a disease or, you know, anything else. I didn't throw myself down the stairs to break my leg any more than I deliberately got PTSD, right? So why do I not deserve the same support as someone with that physical challenge?
Yeah. Yeah, it is shifting the mindset to being like, this is like, we think of it very differently from a physical thing, but we shouldn't.
No, we shouldn't. It goes back to the hidden disability versus wheelchair conversation. They're very much the same thing.
Well, I mean, any mental health challenges or mental health disorders that people have, they are physical. It's just that they exist in the brain, which people don't understand. And there's been extensive research done now to show how neural pathways for people who live with PTSD, people who have anxiety, people who live with compulsive eating disorders, and it's neural pathways that, for whatever reason, either are inactive or are overactive, and so it is actually a physical thing, but it's something we can't see. And the brain is a scary organ, and it's something that a lot of people don't understand, and they don't like even to consider the fact that the decisions they make on a day-to-day basis and what they consider to be themselves and their mind, if the things that are less positive are there, so are the things that are more positive. There's a really fascinating TED talk by a woman who did some of the very early research into neural pathways, and she adapted them. So she genetically using DNA from algae to make them light receptive. So you could fire light along them and they would behave differently. And she showed how in mice with compulsive eating disorder, for by simply turning and ground, pick up air and hold its hands like this as though it was wanting to eat, and then you turned off the pathway and it stopped and just went back to normal. So yeah, I think it's in some ways, I don't know, I also feel like maybe that makes it more comforting, because if you explain to people that there probably is, or that there definitely is a physical element to it, it just exists it's in your head as opposed to kind of out where everybody can see it, then maybe it makes it a little bit more tangible and reachable. We were very comforted by things that we can see and touch and taste and feel. So maybe that's also helpful for people to realize that the brain, as with any other part of our body, can become unwell.
I would say from my experience is that you just have to talk their language and be a part of the community and feel that and get their trust. And trust me, you'll be 100% heard. And this is what I've done, and I've learned from them.
How do you get that trust though in the first place? How do you get that credibility?
So when you talk, I had this is very unique. So when you target like the elderly, so they're very more conserved, you have to dress conservatively, talk to them conservatively, that you do not want to promote bad actions. No, you link those bad actions, like for example, is like is protection. It's not, I don't define them as bad actions. So they listen. Okay, then the young generation, you try to talk to them with open mind, and you give them more information. You have to maneuver with the society, and you have to earn their trust. I don't know how to explain it, but it worked. It worked, yes.
Well, speaking to people on their level, I think, and in a way that they're used to communicating.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And make them feel comfortable. Yeah.
We're getting another question in from
I think my experience has probably been.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think my experience has been similar to Maha's. As soon as you say that you work for a women's health company and your aim is to empower women to manage their health themselves, I found that the outpouring of stories, and sometimes things that have not been discussed, like clearly not been discussed with other people, because there's an assumption that you'll listen, and so I listen. And I definitely take, I think with everybody, the approach that my mother always took when she parented us, which encouragement is much more important than advice. People will ask you for advice. They don't ask you. The most important thing is to encourage them. And so, you tell them they're doing a great job. And isn't it fantastic that they've learned about their health and that they've taken the initiative to learn more, and that their children are very happy to have them. Yeah, again, a big part of being empowered as a woman is having self-confidence and self-belief. And every story that is shared with you is an opportunity to a little bit more of that.
Yeah, agreed. A question from the audience is, do you have a story or reflection from a time that inspired you to push forward and keep doing the work that you're doing? Were you at a breaking point and then something came forward to keep you motivated? This is open to anyone. Go ahead, Maha.
I would like to share a story, and which is it's so dear to my heart. So when I came back and started the HIV research, I got a lot of resistance. I cannot deny that. It all worked out fine now, but it was hard, and I was almost gonna give up. My daughters were in Boston, back home, and like I should go back, just go work to my lab in Boston. But during my visits to the clinic, and we were establishing a database and to see what is needed as a research project to start with. So I've met some ladies who have a very rare type of HIV. It's HIV-2, which is very rare, and there is no commercial test available in the market to measure the viral load. So what you have right now in the clinics and in the labs is for HIV-1. So if you have HIV-2, your doctor cannot monitor your level of virus, so they don't know the prognosis of your treatment and so forth. So the group that I work with, the infectious disease consultant, they're so amazing. They hooked her up. She's a divorcee, and she was a divorcee because she was an HIV positive. So they hooked her up, and she got married to a new partner who is HIV positive. But they arranged this. She fell in love with him, and she's happy whatever. She wants to have a baby, but she can't because the physicians, they need to monitor your viral load so that they can, with the proper treatment, so they can give you the green light to get pregnant. And she couldn't do that because the test was not available. So that promoted us to develop an assay for that. And I remember each visit in her clinic, she asks, like, do you have the test yet? Do you have the test yet? That promoted me to work harder, to go back to the lab. And then we got the assay done and worked. And now she's happily married with a baby. So that is a joy for us. Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's a very direct impact, right?
Oh, yes. Yes. And I think all the team members, after that story, they want to do more. So it's a very inspiring, when you see that your research has an impact on patients and their lives. It's amazing. You can't imagine. Yeah. That's it. That's my story.
Oh, that's
Sorry.
lovely. Andrea or Sophie, do you have a story as well?
I think for me, my biggest motivator is my own children. Having been through the experience that I've been through myself and seeing the impact it had on them. I mean, I being diagnosed with PTSD, I actually have no recollection for the first 9 to 12 months of my daughter's life. The trauma has basically removed my ability to make memories at that stage, which is heartbreaking. So to be in that situation, I would like to be able to think that what we're doing, the work that the four of us, as well as the wider community, are doing, will make it easier for my kids. So hopefully my children will never have to walk in my shoes.
Yeah, Definitely. I think that motivates me as well with the birth center is that, want women to have a better experience for themselves than what we're currently getting. And a lot of people are getting trauma, and then it does kind of roll into postnatal depression and all these other things. And we're not as a community necessarily tying it together that this is from the birth. This is not educating women. This is not giving them the ability to make their own decisions in that moment. It's a big vulnerability that we're not taking care of properly. And so the more I see as a doula, even from birth, is just the more I'm like, nope, we need to have another option. There needs to be somewhere else to birth. And here specifically, because there's not that option. We don't have home birth. We don't have, birth center options. We don't have even midwifery care as an option.
No.
Until the delivery itself, if they're available.
We go back to our previous point, education is key. The four of us have done nothing but talk about how we need to educate. And it's that's what it is. We need cultural acceptance. We need society to broaden their minds and appreciate that not everybody fits in a box. We are all different. There are challenges faced by every single one of us, and education is key. And so is acceptance.
Yeah, definitely. We're getting another question in. How will you mentor the next generation of female leaders to not have the barriers you have had to break through? Go ahead, Maha.
Okay, so I think this is what we're trying to do with empowering women in medicine and STEM, because we lack mentorship, we lack role models. I think the same situation. We need to have networks. We need to connect more, and we need to mentor ourselves. We need to be role models right now. I think this. I've struggled, and this is one of the reasons that I graduated and I wanted to start research. There wasn't the proper mentorship, so I had to move to the US and then get the training, come back, and I'm doing this right now to young females. And we actually started a program to help young female scientists to pursue academia and research, because this is where we come in to help the new generation. And I think what we need right now is mentorship and network system at all different levels, not just young, even with leaders. We still need support despite our positions.
Yeah, and even like that opens more conversations as well. When if you are having a mentee, that can also be enlightening as well. So the time you give in both directions can be helpful for both, I think. Anybody else?
I agree. I think, for us, I guess from a startup perspective, the biggest barrier to entry for women at the moment statistically is the lack of capital and venture capital funding that's available to women every year. So 2.8% capital went to female-led companies last year. And you'd have people say, oh, that's just an excuse. But for whatever reason, female-oriented company are not securing the capital. And the reasons given are several. But you're building something that's only for half the population. That means that how are you going to scale effectively? I hasten to add that nobody ever made this comment of Viagra when it was introduced into the US market, whenever it was in the 1980s. But I think what that means, we've just been through the FLA accelerator for female empowerment, and we're doing a funding round at the moment. And the conversations that we had with a lot of women who have raised funding or support others in raising funding is, don't go down this route that everybody else goes down. You're not going to succeed. Explore alternative funding methods. And as long as that is the case, that what is the standard way for tech startups to raise capital is not the way that is recommended for women to raise capital, you've got a problem, because it means female-led companies that are solving problems for women, that are breaking down barriers for women, are less likely to get to where they need to be. Are going to take longer to grow, are going to have to, not beg, borrow, but alternative funding methods, be very inventive with money, etc. So I think for us, our stage is helping other women who are running businesses to access the capital that they need to ensure that their business is a success.
I think that's kind of why there tends to be more angel networks that are just women, right? Like we're seeing more and more of those come up because I think women are recognizing like we need to support each other since we're not getting it from elsewhere, which is funny as well, because I have read that the women-led companies actually are more stable. They're not making as many quick decisions. They're being kind of the turtle runs the race type of mentality, and they see the long-term goals a bit better. It's at least what was written than their male counterparts. So it's interesting that they're having a harder time funding.
Yeah. So and again, it's there's movement globally to get more women onto boards, because diverse boards, not just in terms of gender, but in terms of, I mean, from a cultural perspective, from an age perspective, outperform every single time boards that are not diverse. And actually, the optimum number of women on a board is 66%. Statistically, if you're looking at the kind of, I guess, the growth and gross profit or net profit margins of organizations. So I think, yeah, and for companies, for startups, female-led companies generate more revenue for every dollar of investment than male or co-led companies. So the statistics are definitely there, but it's just about it's a matter of rebalancing a system that has, for better or worse, been weighted in, I guess, against women in various ways traditionally.
Yeah, well, times are changing, so we'll see how it goes. I think we're kind of gonna wrap up here now. Can everybody who's on turn on their camera? Karina had requested that we get a screenshot of all the guests and the speakers as well.
Yeah, if anyone has the option of turning your camera on, please join us. We'll do a group shot. I think some are just using their auto. Okay, well,
Yeah.
we'll do one.
And in the region here too, because we do a lot of, I'm running a support group for COVID, and we do a lot of events for that. And the people do not like to turn on their cameras, even if there's two. It's just, I don't know if it's a regional, like, cultural thing, or, there's always 100 other things going on when you're working from home.
They're in their pajamas, trust me.
As well.
Oh, I think Monica's going to join us. Hey, Monica.
Oh, great. Thank you for joining us.
To be fair, you're lucky I'm not in my pajamas.
Yeah, we're getting a comment in from Sarah. We humans are mental, emotional, and physical beings, and good health must address these three. I've kept on because the need is still there. Government sometimes stops people from revealing problems.
Beautiful words, Sarah. Thank you. All
Would you like to
right.
turn your camera on too for us?
I think she's called in. She's on her phone.
Oh, okay.
All
Great.
right. So we'll do it in 3 seconds. I'll count to 3 and then we'll do it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Yay.
Get it?
Yeah.
Great.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to the panelists for joining us. It was really a wonderful conversation. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It's all very impactful and helpful to the community and to the women, and really appreciate your time and your efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Karina.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Please continue the conversation on Twitter. And if you follow the hashtag GEW2020, you'll be able to keep the engagement going, and we'll be recirculating this. Thank you so much,
I'll
ladies.
just reiterate all of the companies as well. So I think we all kind of individually. So there's NISMH for Mahaz, NIMSA, and I think you're on Twitter, I believe I saw. Sophie's Nabta Health, NABTA Health. Andrea has 2 different companies, Amazing Moms Sensory Supplies and Out of the Blues, which is the support group for mental health. And then myself, I'm on @Ridayh Birth or @Ridayh Birth Center. Okay, so that's how you can get a hold of us. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.